Recently, and when I say recently, I mean a few months ago, I got a request from a viewer to elaborate on 二重敬語 or double 敬語, as well as the rules for turning a verb into the 尊敬語 form. Here's a quick lesson on what 二重敬語 is. 二重敬語 is often defined as the error of applying two or more 敬語 formation rules to a single verb. 二重敬語 is usually frowned upon by many for its redundancy, but it's important to keep in mind that what's considered correct or acceptable depends on who you talk to, and that it has changed over time. Let me give you an example of 二重敬語. お食べになられる is considered 二重敬語 because the 尊敬語 rule, or 何々になる, and the 尊敬語 suffix, られる, are both applied to the single verb 食べる. Instead, it should be either お食べになる, 食べられる, or 召し上がる. On the other hand, when two verbs are joined by the particle て, you can apply one Keigo rule to each of the two verbs. For instance, the combination of the verb 食べる plus the particle て plus the verb いる becomes 食べている. Since 食べている is made up of two verbs, it is acceptable to say お食べになっていらっしゃる or 召し上がっていらっしゃる, though native speakers will often change only the second verb, as in 食べていらっしゃる. With this knowledge in mind, let's go through the examples the viewer provided in their comment. 1. The sentence どうぞ持って帰ってください I thought would be お持ちしてお帰りください, but my teacher corrected me that it would be お持ち帰りください. She couldn't really explain why it needed to be this way, and it seemed to contradict the お plus ます plus になる form of 尊敬語. Based on the definition of 二重敬語 we saw, your sentence doesn't contain 二重敬語, so 二重敬語 cannot be the reason why your teacher corrected it. Also, neither your sentence nor your teacher's uses the above rule, because if this rule were to be applied, your sentence would look like お持ちになってお帰りください or お持ちになってお帰りになってください. And your teacher's sentence would be お持ち帰りになってください. To make an imperative sentence polite, you can use either the formula お何々ください or the formula お何々になってください, though the former is more common. For example, 読め read can be either お読みください or お読みになってください, and 急げ hurry up can be either お急ぎください or お急ぎになってください. 読む also has an irregular form ご覧になる ご覧ください or ご覧になってください is another way to say please read. Then why did your teacher correct your sentence? Your teacher's correction is based on the simple fact that this is not how we native speakers say it. And in fact, I did a Google search of the phrase お持ちしてお帰りください in quotation marks, and it returned no hits. The likely reason why your teacher was able to make a correction but couldn't explain why her sentence was the most appropriate is because the more you are exposed to a particular phrase over its alternatives, the more likely you are to choose it. As the number next to each version indicates, the version where only the second verb is conjugated is by far the most popular among native speakers. Your teacher's suggestion, お持ち帰りになる, however, yielded 16.4 million search results. Since you are exposed to this fourth version a lot more frequently than the other three versions, this version intuitively sounds more natural to you, and it is far easier for you to retrieve this version from your memory and use it productively in your speech and writing. The next question. 2. Another example is 先生はアメリカで日本語を教えていました. I thought this would be 日本語をお教えになりました or お教えになっていました or お教えになっていらっしゃいました but my teacher corrected it as 日本語を教えていらっしゃいました. Again, she couldn't tell me why 教える was not changed to 尊敬語 even though it is the teacher who is doing the 教える action. Again, your sentences do not contain 二重敬語, so they are grammatically fine, but it's just that they are not as common as what your teacher suggested. I did some Google searches, and it's clear that your teacher's sentence is once again by far the most common expression. So, given a verb phrase of the form 何々している, native speakers seems to prefer to change the second verb いる as in 何々していらっしゃる. So it is possible that native speakers find it excessive to change both verbs in most contexts. Let's see if this pattern holds for other verbs. For the verb 食べる to eat, the same pattern holds. What about when its irregular form 召し上がる is used? When 召し上がる is used, it is more common to use いました than いらっしゃいました。The expressions お召し上がりになっていました and お召し上がりになっていらっしゃいました are also observed, but お召し上がりになる is generally considered to be 二重敬語 since 召し上がる by itself is a 敬語 expression, and to apply the お何々になる rule to it would be redundant. How about another verb that doesn't have an irregular 尊敬語 form? For example, the verb 走る to run. As expected, the same pattern holds. That is, 何々していらっしゃいました is the most common. What about verbs to which you normally do not apply the お何々になる rule? The verb 言う to say has the irregular 尊敬語 form おっしゃる while we generally do not say お言いになる. When the お何々になる form of the verb should be avoided, then the irregular form plus ていました is the most common form. However, it should be noted that the third version, where both verbs are changed, is slightly more common than the first version, where only the second verb is changed. This deviates from the general pattern we observed in the other verbs. To summarize what we have found, when two verbs are connected by the particle て, if the main verb, that is the first verb, doesn't have an irregular form, then you should change the secondary verb. On the other hand, if the main verb does have an irregular form, then you should change the main verb instead. Also, it is still grammatically correct to change both verbs, but you normally do it to make yourself sound extra polite. This is the end of this video. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or comments, and see you next time.